All right. So this is me doing a live stream, and I've never done this before, so it's a little bit of an experiment. But what I'm going to do is show how I'm taking a customer interview and turning it into something I can actually work on. So I interviewed somebody who's a financial advisor. Give you a little context, the type of product I'm trying to work on and build out is a way to help people with their student loan repayment. And I've been working with financial advisors who have customers that have these issues. So far, I've built something that helps people with their student loan repayment. I'll show it to you now. It's called Pay It Off. Basically, what this does is say, hey, you have this much in debt. This is how long it'll take to pay off. Gives you some suggestions, reminders on making extra payments, some refinancing opportunities, things like that. You can actually buy a plan to get your whole financial situation sorted with student loans and pay it off faster. So that's sort of like the short version of it. There's definitely a lot that happens behind the scenes, but what I have to do is figure out how to expose some of the tools that I do behind the scenes to financial advisors. It seems like they want to pay for that. So what I'm going to do is explain sort of my process here, see if it's at all interesting to you. I'll be going back and forth between this screen, which is basically just my terminal where I'll actually be coding everything. Over here, these are my notes. So this is what was in my I took a screencast of our interview and then took some notes after the fact of what we had talked about and cross-referenced them with what I had written while I was there. The big things I noticed is that with the prototype that I showed him, there were a few potential changes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of these things that he needs and he's expressed that he needs, and I'm going to translate them into stories that I can work on right now. So in this hour, I'll probably just be drumming up what those stories will look like and map it out. And then throughout the next couple of days, I'll be developing those stories as well. Now, I'm going to try my best. I'm not going to show any like actual, not going to show any actual like sensitive data at all. Most of this is just going to be like prototyping and working through actually building the product out and designing it. So it is, it should be fun. I'm also going to share this. So give me 1 second while I figure that out, because I'm pretty new to doing all this. Because I'm pretty new. right. Cool. So yeah, this is very much an experiment, so bear with me. I'm still figuring out the best way to do this. Also, eventually I want to figure out how to have my face on here. I know it's just me talking to the screen, which isn't all that interesting. And if I end up whiteboarding anything, I'll change that. All right, let's get to it. So the context I have is that we have, I'll show you the prototype, an envision prototype that I want to break into a sizable chunk of stories. Now, they're not going to be they're going to be pretty big. They're going to be like epics. So historically, whenever I'm taking something that is a like big chunk of possible needs and trying to figure out, okay, how much is actually needed, I'll just do some pretty ruthless prioritization. So let me pull up this right here. For instance, it would be nice, for instance, that if advisors want to use this tool, they probably want to log in on their own login. But in my case, I prefer that I have them just have a profile already. That saves me a bunch of dev time. And that way I don't have to worry about, I'm doing a lot of work to make sure that these people have sort of these portal to go to. I'm not too concerned about the marketing of it either. There's only one person that's going to start using it. So really all I need to do is find some way to break this new admin account out. So I'm going to need a few things, and I'll add these over here, which are a few things off the top of my head. If I have a new advisor, then, and I'll call this Pay It Off for Advisors. Actually, there's a better format to do this in. Let's do this at Carbon 5. It's a story map. Let me figure that out. So it gives me, there you go. Gives me a big whiteboard, and I am going to do the story maps. I think I have retro and experience maps. It's going to be a little different because the experience map is kind of simple. I'll add a story map though. So it's all the things that I think I want to build. Oh, let's Pay It Off for advisors. All right, so I hope you can see this. It's a little hard to see, so I'll zoom in. Some things I know. I know that they want to, advisors need to generate plans. So these are things in the needs column, I'd say. And these are the things that I can build now. And I need to generate plans and more like what I need to build. So there's like the sort of like more general want. And then there's the what I need to build in order to make that happen. So right now I can build plans, but I do some of it manually. So I'll have to automate plan generation for extra payments. And there's another thing here. Advisors want accounts. So they're going to have their own sort of admin. So in order to do that, I'll make these more epics. Do a proper story map here. And I'm going to get rid of that guy. All right. So what do I need to build in order for advisors to get accounts? I'm going to need some sort of advisor role. I'm going to need some way of determining like client role. Currently, I only have users, so there's not really like a well-defined sort of client situation. It's users and admins. So right now there's just a Boolean defining those things. I'm probably going to need something that's more systematic. So I could combine these to like a role-based system of access. And I know from experience that this type of thing isn't trivial. So that's going to be broken out into a bunch of systems. But I'm going to find the fastest way to do that. And that's kind of where the story generation will come in. So I know in order to just have advisors use this, I can't just give them access to my admin account because then they're able to see everything. And I'm going to have to get a little smarter and secure about that situation since I already have paying customers. With clients, I have this other sort of situation where what is a user that signs up right now? Are they a client? No, they're also not an advisor. So there's going to be some sort of like base user. Actually, it might be best to do advisors, admins, clients, users. That's probably the biggest chunk that I'd have to knock out first in order for this to be a reality. I'd have to change up sign in to redirect. And I'd also have to probably handle what the, I guess access for equal. So there's one way to do this from a data model perspective, modeling exactly like, this is as simple as like an enum situation. And I'm using Elixir and I love using that, but I haven't used, it'll be pretty new when I start deving on this sort of like role-based system of access because I haven't had to do it before. I've done it a ton of times in Rails and I've used can, so I don't really know what's available in the Phoenix Elixir, situation yet, but I think that'll become more obvious as I start to go along. I'll just take a little bit of research and maybe a quick spike on maybe the best system here. So once I do this, just to give you a little rundown, once I actually go through and define all the things that I think I might need in order for this to work, I'm actually gonna take each of these pieces and define what's the most important. If there's anything I can get rid of and still launch this MVP. So let me just take another quick break. Hold on 1 second. Again, thank you for being patient with this because it's all pretty new to me. So I'm not going to be amazing at it right away. All right, let's keep going. So I also need to better define sort of what these advisors want. So let's walk through this. Advisors are going to add a client. So there's also this client index. So once they have accounts, they're also going to need some client management. And I don't know how, this won't need to be too advanced. I mean, I can scaffold the shit out of this. So this is kind of the easy part. Let's see. The client index is this page. And you'll also have an add a client section. So in the add a client section, I'm really only asking for an email. And in the meantime, if I didn't want clients to be, there is a shortcut about role-based stuff where, clients aren't actually going to have access to this, even though I'm getting their email. It may be that a client is nothing more than just a JSON blob. But I don't think that'll really scale up nicely. I think it's better to take clients and make them their own sort of resource. Hopefully that doesn't get too heavy because clients are going to look very similar to users. I could also sort of like virtually define a client. Sometimes users are, sometimes users could be considered clients if they have a certain behavior. So what that means is I could have users have relationships in the data model. So we'll see if that's something that's useful. One other thing I want to do. Alrighty. Cool. All right, let's get going. So add a client. So there's going to be some sort of way to add a user here. Anyway, once they get in here, they need to enter loans. So this I already have built. This is going to be a new add client loans and index. And another thing that's going to be a part of this is submit extra payments. This is really plan generation. So let's see, add, boom. I'm able to add these loans in and then recommend an extra payment. So the whole plan report generation concept comes in a little bit here. Generate, let's see, I'm gonna break this out into report. Have some ideas around this. And really, I'm getting this out there. This might not even be that accurate. It's just trying to get what I think needs to be built into like chunks. Each of these could be multiple stories. This one is more discrete. It looks like it's just one story. So here I'm actually generating a report. And I'm going to need to do some modeling on the back end, figure out a plan data model. Elixir is really good at reasoning with structures of data that are really, usually hard to manage. And it might make sense to actually just do this at runtime, not even persist it. I'm gonna test that out. So it might be a spike worth doing at runtime, or at least just doing something that I can do for each report, because the artifact printable reports. Before I even like do the graphs, I'm gonna need to do the, okay, well, what are the graphs over time? So I have a couple graphs here, and I actually learned through the interviews, and I'll show you some of the notes here, that they want this to be, printable is important. Printable is actually one of the most important things, but they agreed that it was worth it to just be able to print and then save to PDF. So, you know, I don't have to like export to PDF or anything. So that's nice. That'll take a lot less time, and I can just focus on the style being clean, and that'll be good. It will be relevant for when I want to like figure out, okay, is this graph library printable, for instance? So here, they do want to go back from the report. So something I'm missing here is the ability to like go back to where I was before. And maybe not go back, but there was a need to actually tweak this like extra payment number. So I'll come back to that. That is, it seems like a nice to have. So I'll add that in here so I don't forget. Change in extra payment. So just to like reiterate where I'm at, right now I'm just taking all of the things I've learned through the interview and then estimating sort of what big chunks I think would need to happen in order for them to get to the MVP. Now, from here, we're going to figure out, okay, what are like the discrete like pieces of stories that we can write on here. And I'm usually using Pivotal Tracker for this, but since it's just me working on this, I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be using the Asana or Trello for this type of thing, just because it's more simple for me. Okay, so let's keep going. So advisors need to generate plans for their clients. I'm going to need to look at the plan model. I'm going to need to spike on graph libraries. I've used a bunch before, so I'll list a few out that I think could be useful, worth talking about. E3, there's chart.js. There's pie charts. I think those are the ones I've used before and liked. Won't be too bad, I don't think. I think the trick will be figuring out how to, printable is important. So this is high priority. Graphs, balance over time. So I'm going to need to keep each of these as a section. So we'll be balance over time is a really different piece of data than earnings over time. So this will be earnings, and then total savings. My goal is to find a way to get all this data so pre-rendered, so that a lot of this data should come from the server and just happen, just be on the page when it loads. Like I don't have to get too creative about this being dynamic, which is nice. It seems like the only thing that was important is that it gets generated and then I can somehow print it off. What was actually more important was the copy used. So I have some tweaks there, but that's not really important for this case. Okay, another big one is figuring out how to, let's see, how to actually take this. I think I actually got a lot of it. I mean, this is the bulk. This is definitely a lot of the meat. I must be forgetting a few things though. Let's go back here. Yeah, okay, so there is like some concept of like client page lists their loans, shows a report. It's really the client show page. Details page shows their report, gives info on the plan. And we're also like, I'm going to put this in sort of like a future column, future feature. More of a like loan tracking situation. Okay. I think I'll worry about that later. All right. Let's see. Is there anything else here I'm missing? Because a lot of this loan index stuff I'm not worried about. I can reuse a bit of it. It's this that's going to be tricky. And a lot of the like ways to figure this out. Just verify my notes that I'm totally there. Oh yeah, a page or a blog post to explain the monthly payment. That's more of an artifact. So this is more like plan execution. This is loan tracking. Plan reminders to what's his name? The advisors. So that could be like potential messaging system, maybe. There could be some meat there. I haven't figured that out yet. And then I'm going to need some more shit here. Okay. Sorry, I'm just thinking for a sec. So plan execution is something that happens after they've generated their plans. So potential messaging system. Just gave me a bit of pause. Okay. Also an explanation of the extra payment calc, which could be a blog post or something. These are deliverables. They all use my time, so. I don't want them to be able to tweak their numbers, which is fine. Email them through pay it off possible. And then the last one. Yeah, I've got some tweaks to like copy. And then let's see here, add client loans and index payment. Show the total monthly spend with the extra payments. So this might be dynamic actually. All right, so cool. So what I've got here is a bunch of potential features. Let me line them up. So it's interesting. It's really interesting because these are going to end up turning into epics. I mean, they're really, most of these are actually pretty engineering because most of these are stories. Let's see. Check this out. So one of the hard parts about this whole process is figuring out, especially on my own, full backlog with this. And the way I break out my process is I have growth, product, and market fit. So growth is what the business needs to stay alive. So these are like fundraising or revenue sort of KPIs that I keep track of. Product is everything I'm doing related to the product. So any prototyping. So actually, like this is a good example. I put in here an MVP epic for advisors, and here is like a prototype for advisor communication. Um, so this is, I would actually probably put this in the ice as different than what I'm thinking. But I can say that I've like mapped out what the MVP will look like. I'm going to deprioritize what the mission is. And I've got a lot of stuff in here. So I've got some backlog grooming to do. But in the meantime, I'm going to find the most important stories and add them. So none of this stuff happens if I don't have a data model around a client or an admin or an advisor. So the spike is really the first thing I need. So we're going to talk about a roles spike. And actually tag this as a spike. Tag spike. And great works. So this is going to be, I don't have to do like proper as a user or anything here. Now, usually story writing takes hours. What I'm going to do is actually just pick out a few things, or usually it'll take like a full hour, and I think it would be kind of boring if I did all that live. I'm going to do a few that are useful just to give you a taste of what it looks like to write stories and different types of stories. And then I'll probably just do the rest later tonight or tomorrow morning. I'm actually going to start coding tomorrow, so there's not going to be too much coding tonight. And that's when I'm going to start like attacking each of these spikes and like walking through how I'm going to execute on them. So the role spike is investigate, let's see, libraries for introducing roles-based access in Elixir. So I'd argue that's probably the most important thing to do, since that's one of the biggest changes to the data model. Graphs, spike, and that's going to be, these are all things that will de-risk this. What's the best library to use to generate graphs requirements? And usually this will have some deliverable, so it'll be let's see. Most of these use JSON, but that's my preferred way of doing that. I have a feeling that high charts will be the one, but I think they charge now. Let's see. All right. Spike. All right. Cool. Got 2 spikes in there. I'm gonna actually put a lot of this stuff back here because it's annoying me, and I gotta groom the shit out of that. It's a lot of like stuff over the months that I've added and have failed to prioritize. There's a few things I can probably delete too. So yeah, it's on my list. So, or was I? All right. So I've got a few of these, and add these to my roles one. Now, one thing I like Pivotal Tracker for is that you can assign points to this, but velocity doesn't really matter in my case because I'm not really too worried about how fast I'm delivering because I'm the only engineer on it. So I can actually probably start adding some basic like client management. But maybe we just start with like advisor sign-in. That's probably a good starting feature as an advisor. And like I said, I'm only going to write like 1 or 2 stories because it's going to be mad boring to just do that the whole time. Might dig into a little code early here. As an advisor, I want to log in and see a list of my clients. So honestly, this part is a separate story. It would be I want to log in so that I can have my own admin. So acceptance criteria for this is usually the fact that let's see here. So for this, it's important that the advisor can actually go in, cannot view any other restricted page, so can't view /admin. And acceptance would be advisor enters email and password. And I'll pre-set up one. I think that's the fastest way for this, because if I had to do a whole like advisor creation process where the advisors have to like sign up, I just have one advisor, right? So I don't really need any of that yet. And it's pretty trivial to build down the road, so I'm not really too worried about that. So they enter their email and password. So it's really a session. So the notes, advisor uses / so full sign-in URL I have already. And then the advisor is going to use, let me show you a little bit. So I'm using Elixir. And the way I have my routes set up is I have some public routes here. And these are mainly like, static pages. Page controller is a little longer than I'd want it to be. I've got some login required for anything that is user related or has any sensitive data. And then there's an admin that's kind of the way that I'm running my ship, and that requires just basic auth. So a big part of this is figuring out, all right, well, basic auth now doesn't cut it. I need to have some sort of restricted access, role-based access to this admin portal. And I think what I'm going to end up seeing is something along the lines of advisors. And they're going to have their own well, really their own module completely, because this user path is only relevant to them, and their clients don't need to see that stuff. So I do have some of these API endpoints. I don't think I'm going to need them for this case. Yeah, so far the app's pretty simple. It's nothing too cray-cray. Really just like, so I think this roles-based thing will be probably adding more complexity than I want to. But I already use enums, so it won't be too trivial. It won't be too bad. Let me show you where that is. So enums are used, let's see, where do they end up using loans? So loans have enums. And these enums are categories because there's a ton of different ways loans can appear. So this app works on student loans, and it deals with standard and graduated. There's also extended and like several other types of things. So it's kind of it's going to get more complex soon. Let's put it that way. And it's really easy to get a little overcomplicated with some of this stuff. So what I'm going to try to do best I can is keep it simple. So this might not even be the first story now that I think about it. The fact that an advisor could sign in is predicated on the fact that I've set up that data somewhere. And that would mean that I would have to set it up manually at first. And I don't even have a way to create a user as an admin. So I think that's actually the first story. So let's call these epics something. Let's call this one roles. And roles is going to be a little epic here. We're going to make it this. And they'll use sign in advisor ends up at. And they're going to have like /advisors/ like it could be my clients. Or it could be an advisor show page, right? Advisors one. I mean, is that simple enough? I can verify that you're the advisor that should be viewing that pretty simply. I mean, I already have a concept of a current user, so that's not too much of a problem. I'll show you that. So the current user. So if we go over to, I'll just actually search for it. So I had this auth module. Helps me define what a current user is, so I can actually reference them whenever I need to. And this is, let's see here. It's interesting. Maybe get a little fancier with this. I verify a current user, and they must be signed in. But all I'm verifying is that they're there. And then there's this authorization step. So this is just taking the params, matching it. And this is probably only used for actions that use that. Yeah, like on delete. Yeah, anything that has it in the param. So you could probably, it might be better and safer to just verify a current user in the meantime and not spoof it in the URL. So I actually think advisors, for instance, my clients would really be the advisor show. And I would just be verifying that there is a current user, because you can't spoof the fact that there's a current user there. So authorization would happen on other pages. That would be the trick that I would have to work through is in the current user under certain routes. And I mean, Elixir makes this pretty simple because you can just use pipes. I'll just end up saying, okay, actually, let me write a little story for this. Cool. So this is part of the role-based piece of things. I think this is going to be my first chunk. All right, so I've got create just the straight up create a user. Right now that all happens through the client. And I also need to have authorized. So when I verify a current user, I also need to verify their role. Current user role. So this is more of a, as a user, I only want access to my roles. To my resources is a better way of putting it. So like I kind of talked about before, if you look at the router, you'll see that login required gives me it's a pipeline that I can use to say, okay, there needs to be a session available. And it'll 401 if there's none. And then there's a basic auth that I'm only using for admin, and that's not the safest way to handle it. I think, you can get by with that for a little bit. And I might still be able to use that for the admin portion just as an added security. But for any of these routes, I'm going to also pipe through something like, is admin. And I'm going to verify that the connection coming through is an admin user because I'll have access to the current user through the con. I should, at least. I mean, when I'm in a loan controller, for instance, I'm verifying the current user. So if we look at that, we'll see that on the assignments, it's on the connection. And I should have access to that in my pipeline. I'm hoping that there's a library that can give me better ways of defining access. I don't want to dig into the current user on every route, but if I can do a pretty quick pipeline, a quick pipe with Elixir, it won't be too bad. All right, so resources so that I only see what's relevant to me. So I'm going to keep that there for now and just call this the roles-based thing. Okay. All right, so I've got a decent amount of stories, and these are literally all related to these first couple advisor need accounts, and we're just going to call this roles. Because it's just a piece of the system that doesn't exist. It needs to exist for advisors to do this flow. And that's actually a question, like, do I need to build these roles-based access in order to build this MVP? Again, like, this is a completely different flow, and it has a whole different header. It's a completely different system. I think it'll get dirty kind of quick if I don't. So better to start clean. It's only going to take me probably an extra half day to make it clean too. So I would consider that worth it. Most apps nowadays are going to have some sort of, roles. And I can't really get away from that. I've sort of done the shitty version of it so far. One way I could maybe get around it is to have certain basic auth credentials route to other no, I already don't like that as I'm saying it. If you have ideas on this too, let me know. Access for each role. So yeah, I already talked about that. Okay, so this is going to be important, and then that'll unblock this. And then there'll be client management. I don't need to do much. I mean, once I build that route, I'm going to be jamming because the rest of that stuff is, that'll take a day to do almost, I think, all of these stories. But I think this reporting is going to be tricky. All right. Well, I think I'm in a good starting point. I've got all my sort of priority one situations going on. I've got, I think realistically to get this polished, I'm going to need more time because I'm not 24/7 coding. Or maybe I need to. This is the thing. Maybe I really need to be making this number one priority right now. And that's the hard part about this. Anytime you're working on something in a startup, is this the most important thing? And I think it is because this is something I can price out. So if I'm able to start charging people for it right away, that's a pretty valuable thing that I should start, building sooner than something that wouldn't. I do have ideas for a prototype for a more consumer-facing product, but this is going to lead to insights that I can't get elsewhere. So I have to keep convincing myself that this is the way to go. All this plan execution, for instance, is valuable for learning about how people need to do support. Okay. So I think that's enough for now. Thanks for joining me on this experiment. This is largely just a process, really. It took less than an hour. It would take a customer interview, generate a bunch of more high level things. And you'll imagine that as I go, there's going to be probably maybe 15 more stories out of this. And if I'm being realistic, it's probably going to take 2 weeks to do that. So, in that situation, I definitely say, okay, I'm definitely going to dev as fast as I can on this stuff. But at the same time, I need to be realistic and make sure I'm able to under promise and over deliver. So the meeting I'll have with this guy to demo this stuff and have him start using it sort of turnkey. Um, there's a lot of things out here that I haven't even talked about yet. Referrals, um, to the future needs. It'll be like referrals, referrals, advisor, onboarding. It's a lot here. So yeah, so that's pretty much what's going on right now. I feel good about this. This gives me a lot of information directly from someone who would pay me. And it's not going to take too long to build. And all right, cool. So I'll show up tomorrow. And thanks for tuning in.